pink slip in hand right on my son's birthday. Funny how the fluorescent office lights never felt colder. Mark 52, former marketing manager, clutching the company badge that once meant everything. What happens when the kid who mocked your lack of a degree ends up unemployed by your own doing? Ever had life flip the script on you? On my 50th birthday, I wasn't expecting anything more than a quiet morning and maybe a phone call from an old friend or two. So when I found that card in the mailbox with just 3 haunting words, "I never left," I froze. The handwriting was unmistakably his. The way he used to sign his name, simple yet elegant. For a moment I thought I was dreaming or losing my mind. Marking the passage of a half-century without him felt like a cruel joke. I looked down the hall toward the basement door, that old familiar door I hadn't dared approach for years. The basement door's brass handle caught the weak autumn light filtering through the hallway window. It gleamed as if polished yesterday, but the wood around it was cracked and worn a silent witness to time's slow decay. That door held memories, some warm, some raw, and now it seemed to hold a secret I wasn't prepared to face. Outside, the air smelled of dry leaves mixed with fresh rain, a typical early autumn day in Portland. The quiet neighborhood was draped in that melancholy calm that fits days like this perfectly. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. 30 years of marriage, and suddenly that chair was just an empty space. Sarah was gone, vanished without a trace in 2005. The police had long since closed the case, chalking it up to her running off or worse, but I never believed that. She was my wife, and there were too many unanswered questions. Yet here I was facing the 15th anniversary of her disappearance in silence until this card arrived, shaking the very foundation of my carefully rebuilt life. The morning had started like any other birthday these days, quite alone with only the soft hum of the coffee maker and the occasional drip of rain against the window. I made myself a simple breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. The smell of the coffee mingled with the damp earth scent wafting in from outside. The kind of smell that brings back memories both good and painful. I glanced at the clock. 7:32 a.m. No calls, no texts, just the slow tick-tock of time passing me by. I noticed the mail pile on the counter and sifted through it mechanically. My eyes catching the familiar handwriting. My heart skipped. The card was thick cream-colored, the kind Sarah always favored for special occasions. I unfolded it carefully as if handling a fragile artifact, and read the 3 words again. I could almost hear her voice in the silent room. But how could this be? She was gone, and yet here was proof she or someone wanted me to know she never really left. A soft knock on the window startled me. Peering out, I saw Mrs. Whitman, our next-door neighbor. She was known for her sharp eyes and sharper tongue, always watching, always knowing more than she let on. Her gaze was fixed on my house, curious, maybe concerned. I waved awkwardly. She gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging the weight of the moment, but chose not to intrude further. I pocketed the card and headed down the hallway. Each step brought me closer to the basement door. My hand trembled as I reached out, fingers brushing against the cold brass handle. The wood beneath my fingertips felt brittle, the faint cracks tracing patterns like the scars on an old friend's face. Years of silence hung in the air, thick and heavy, pressing down on me. I paused, inhaling deeply, the smell of damp wood and mustiness filling my senses. There was a quiet hum, the distant tap-tap of rain against the window, and then the sudden creak as I pulled the door open. It protested like a living thing, groaning in protest at being disturbed after so long. The basement stairs plunged into darkness, a void that swallowed the faint light from above. With a mixture of fear and hope swirling in my chest, I took the first step down. The wood creaked beneath my weight, echoing through the silent house. My breath caught as the shadows thickened, hiding secrets I'd tried to forget. The card burned in my pocket, a silent promise that something waited for me below. The memory of Sarah flashed before me, her laughter in this very basement, the way she'd hum softly while fixing things or setting up the old records we rarely played anymore. Was this some cruel reminder? Or was there truly a message left behind, waiting for me to find it? I swallowed hard, descending further into the unknown. Before I could step fully into the darkness, a faint sound from downstairs made me freeze, a soft rustle, almost like a whisper carried on the damp air. Was it my imagination, or had someone been waiting for me all these years, just beneath my feet? The basement stairs groaned under my weight, and as I reached the last step, the light flickered, casting long, trembling shadows on the cracked walls. I reached into my pocket once more, fingers closing around the card, the familiar handwriting both a comfort and a torment. I couldn't turn back now. Whatever awaited me in that basement, I was determined to uncover it. The past wasn't done with me yet. The basement smelled of damp wood and stale air, a musty scent that seemed to seep into my lungs as I took my first few cautious steps down the creaky stairs. But despite the chill and gloom, there was a faint glow near the old workbench tucked away in the far corner. A small lamp, dust-covered but still casting a warm light over a cluttered surface of scattered tools, yellowed papers, and forgotten memories. The light seemed almost unnatural, like a beacon calling me deeper into a past I'd tried so hard to leave behind. I moved closer, the beam catching floating dust motes that danced lazily in the narrow shaft of light. The smell of aged wood mingled with the faint lingering scent of Sarah's perfume, a smell I hadn't noticed in years, but that instantly transported me back to moments of laughter and quiet evenings spent down here. The basement had been our refuge, once a place where she worked on her projects, while I pored over numbers in the evenings. Under the workbench, I noticed something odd, a faded photograph taped carefully beneath the worn wooden surface. The edges of the photo curled with age, and the image was barely discernible. It was Sarah, younger and smiling, standing in the very same basement, her eyes bright and full of secrets. I reached out my fingers, trembling slightly as I peeled the photo loose. There was something about the way it was hidden, as if Sarah wanted me to find it someday. The afternoon sun filtered weakly through a small basement window, casting long shadows that flickered with the swaying branches outside. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the city beyond, but down here, time felt suspended. I knelt and began sorting through a pile of old boxes thick with dust and forgotten layers of our lives. Each box was a small time capsule, filled with relics of happier days, birthday cards, old clothes books Sarah had treasured. As I sifted through the clutter, I found a leather-bound journal buried beneath a heap of yellowed envelopes. The cover was worn, the leather cracked at the spine, but the pages inside were surprisingly intact. Opening it, I saw Sarah's neat handwriting sprawling across the pages, notes, thoughts, sketches, and cryptic entries that hinted at worries and plans she had kept hidden. One passage caught my eye, referencing a place beneath the surface and a trust that cannot be broken. It sent a shiver down my spine. Driven by a mixture of dread and curiosity, I examined the workbench more closely. The wood was scarred and dented, the surface cluttered with screws, nails, and stray tools, but something felt off. My hand traced the edge of a board that seemed looser than the rest. Pressing down, I discovered a hidden compartment, a narrow, dust-choked space just large enough to hold a small envelope. With careful fingers, I pulled it free and unfolded the brittle paper inside. There, nestled within the envelope, lay a small brass key and a note in Sarah's unmistakable handwriting. "Trust me." The note was brief, but packed with meaning, a lifeline thrown across the years. What was I meant to trust? What door did this key unlock? I stared at it long after my hand stopped shaking, the weight of its promise sinking in. A sudden creak above startled me, sharp and unexpected in the stillness. I froze, heart hammering, straining to hear. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from the floor above the unmistakable tread of someone approaching. It was impossible. No one else should be in the house. Was I imagining things, or had the silence at last been broken? The basement door stood behind me, a silent sentinel to the secrets I was only beginning to uncover. The photo of Sarah, the journals, the hidden key. They were pieces of a puzzle far bigger than I'd ever imagined. Something had been planned carefully and deliberately, and I was the last to know. I clutched the key in my palm. As the footsteps grew closer, each step filling the house with tension. The air thickened, the basement's quiet light flickered, and a cold draft whispered through the cracks in the floorboards. Whatever was coming upstairs, it wasn't a friend. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the worn, cozy diner as I settled into a booth across from Paul, an old friend whose calm presence always seemed to steady the storm inside me. The early winter chill outside had pushed us indoors, where the clatter of dishes and low murmur of conversations blended with the occasional sizzle from the kitchen. A faint stream of steam curled from my cracked coffee mug, a thin hairline fracture that had somehow survived countless washes, much like me surviving the years since Sarah vanished. Paul's eyes were sharp, the lines on his face deepened by years of experience. He was the mentor I never asked for, but desperately needed. Once an esteemed detective in the Portland Police Department, now retired, Paul had a knack for seeing what others missed. He sipped his black coffee, then leaned in, voice calm but edged with urgency. "Mark this, Elliot, he's no small player." Paul began, his gaze locking with mine. Sarah's disappearance. It wasn't just a personal tragedy. There's something bigger, something tangled in the finances. Elliot was her colleague, right? I've been digging a bit. It's not clean. My fingers tightened around the chipped mug as I absorbed his words. For years, I'd tried to bury the pain, convincing myself Sarah had left for reasons I couldn't understand. But now, with Paul's insight, the pieces started to form a picture darker than I dared imagine. The mysterious card, the basement door, the hidden notes, they were threads, leading to a fabric woven with secrets. I recounted the arrival of the birthday card, just 3 haunting words I never left. Paul nodded, understanding the weight of that simple message. "It's a clue," he said. "And the basement, that's where the story begins, not ends." Between sips and the soft clinking of utensils, we pored over the documents Sarah had left behind. Ledgers, bank statements, scraps of correspondence. Paul's keen eye picked up anomalies I'd overlooked, unexplained transfers, shadowy accounts, signatures that didn't match. There was a pattern, a story hidden beneath the numbers that Sarah must have tried to expose or escape from. The diner's old neon sign buzzed faintly outside, casting flickering light on the worn booths and peeling wallpaper. Linda, the waitress, with a kind smile and knowing eyes, refilled our coffees without interrupting. Her presence was a comforting constant in a day full of unsettling revelations. As the conversation deepened, Paul proposed a plan. "I want to see that basement again. Together. There's more down there, I can feel it. Let's meet this week and I'll bring some gear lights, maybe a camera. We'll get to the bottom of this." I agreed, a flicker of hope mingling with the dread that had settled in my chest. We had a direction, a partner, and a purpose. But as we left the diner, the shadows lengthened. Across the street, a figure lingered, still watching. The streetlights threw a distorted silhouette against the cracked pavement. Whoever it was, they knew we were digging, and they weren't pleased. I glanced back, but the watcher melted into the evening fog, leaving a whisper of unease in their wake. The house was quiet except for the soft tapping of my fingers on the keyboard and the occasional rustle of papers. In my dimly lit study, the winter evening outside pressed against the windows, a cold draft sneaking in through the cracked basement door. I sat hunched over Sarah's old financial files, the yellowed sheets spread out before me. Like fragments of a hidden life I was only beginning to understand. The numbers didn't add up. Rows of figures blinked back at me from the spreadsheet, some entries deliberately erased, others overwritten with sloppy handwriting. Suspicious transfers appeared here and there, a web of deception slowly unraveling under my tired eyes. It was clear Sarah had stumbled upon something dangerous, something that had cost her dearly. The basement door's handle caught my eye, a small crack running through the brass, mirroring the chipped coffee mug Paul and I had shared our conversations over. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. It was as if the very foundation of my life was fracturing each crack, telling a story of secrets long buried. Just then, my phone buzzed. Paul's name flashed on the screen. I answered quickly, eager for any news. "Mark," his voice came steady but tense. "I've been tracking Elliot. He's moving, might be laying low, but I have a few leads. This isn't just about Sarah anymore. We're dealing with someone who's got a lot to hide." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of his words settle into the room, alongside the chilly winter air. The pieces of this puzzle were falling into place, but the picture was darker than I imagined. Elliot wasn't just a former colleague, he was a key player in whatever had driven Sarah away. Or worse, I closed the files, determination hardening inside me. It was time to face the dangers head-on. I would confront Elliot no matter what it took. The unanswered questions, the cryptic messages, the shadows lurking in my own home, they all demanded answers. As I stood, a faint creak echoed from the basement. I froze. The door handle twitched, and then slowly the door began to open on its own, revealing the darkness beyond. A chill ran down my spine. Was this a sign or a warning? The study's dim light flickered and the cold draft deepened, swirling around me like a whisper from the past. I knew I was stepping into a storm, much larger than I'd ever anticipated. The basement door slammed shut behind me with a sudden bang that reverberated off the concrete walls, making my heart leap into my throat. The heavy old door vibrated on its hinges, then settled into a deep, eerie silence. For a moment, I stood frozen in place, the faint smell of damp earth and decades-old dust filling my nostrils. The beam from my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing peeling, faded wallpaper, curling at the edges and shelves, heavy with forgotten relics coated in layers of dust. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a secret room untouched for years. My gaze settled on a cracked wooden shelf where an old wristwatch lay forgotten among the clutter. The glass face was shattered, revealing the delicate gears beneath, frozen in mid-tick. On the back, engraved in elegant script, was a single word, forever. The irony wasn't lost on me. The watch was broken, much like the life Sarah had left behind, but somehow it still held the promise of enduring love and hope. I reached out and picked it up carefully, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm, as if it was a fragile piece of time itself waiting to be mended. Nearby, a worn leather-bound journal caught my eye. The cover was cracked and softened by time. The edges frayed. I opened it to reveal pages filled with Sarah's unmistakable handwriting, sometimes neat, sometimes hurried, often jagged with fear or desperation. Her words spilled out like a private confession, revealing the truth behind her disappearance. She had planned it all in escape from a man named Elliot, who had turned from colleague to captor. The journal painted a chilling picture of her life, under surveillance, the quiet dread she felt every day, and her desperate search for a way out. As I read, the room felt colder. Shadows seemed to stretch longer. Then the basement steps creaked and Paul appeared at the foot of the stairs. His face was lined with concern, but also determination. "Mark, I didn't expect you to go this far so soon," he said quietly. He knelt beside me, shining his light over the shelves, scanning for anything else we might have missed. Together, we found a crumpled map pinned beneath a loose floorboard. Marked with red circles and notations in Sarah's handwriting, it showed locations scattered across Portland. Some residential, others more obscure. Likely safe houses or places Sarah had sought refuge. Paul explained that Elliot's reach wasn't just local. These points suggested a network, a web that Sarah had been trying to navigate while staying one step ahead. The realization hit me like a punch. Sarah wasn't gone. She might be alive, hiding somewhere close by. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. If she was out there, she was still in danger, and now I was a target for anyone who wanted her silenced. Suddenly, my phone buzzed sharply, the sound startling in the oppressive quiet. I picked it up, and a text message stared back at me from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen. The warning was unmistakable, a threat from whoever was still watching, still trying to keep the truth buried. The basement walls seemed to close in shadows, darkening in the corners as the weight of the danger settled over me. But backing down wasn't an option, not after everything I'd uncovered, not after all these years of silence. Sarah's secrets were no longer hidden, and now it was my turn to bring them to light. I pocketed the watch, closed the journal carefully, and steeled myself for what was to come. Additional details and atmosphere. The air was thick with dust particles swirling gently in the beam of the flashlight. I could almost hear the faint tick of that broken watch, a rhythmic heartbeat frozen in time. The musty scent mixed with the subtle aroma of old paper and leather. It was a smell I associated with forgotten memories and lost moments. Paul's steady presence was a balm amidst the tension. His experience as an ex-detective brought calm and focus even as the stakes grew higher. We spoke in hushed tones, careful not to draw attention to ourselves, acutely aware that whoever sent the message was closer than we thought. I glanced back at the peeling wallpaper. The faded floral pattern seemed to echo Sarah's fading presence in my life. The room with its silence and shadows was a physical manifestation of her hidden struggles, the secrets she'd kept locked away. That cracked watch, lying broken but engraved with forever, was more than just a timepiece. It was a metaphor for our fractured past, and a fragile hope for healing, a symbol I couldn't ignore. The fading sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement as I drove towards the location marked on Sarah's map. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, the weight of years of silence and uncertainty pressing down on me with every mile closer to the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Portland. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a subtle chill weaving through the early evening breeze. I glanced at the map again, the red circle stark against the faded paper, and then ahead at the rusted gate that hung ajar, swaying ever so slightly in the wind. The gate creaked softly, a sound almost lost in the ambient hum of the coming night. It was like a warning, a reminder that I was stepping into a place where secrets had been buried for far too long. I paused for a moment before pushing the gate open fully, the old metal protesting loudly. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim interior of the warehouse, shadows pooling in every corner. The vast space smelled of dust-old machinery and something faintly metallic, perhaps rust or forgotten memories. I wasn't alone for long. From the far end of the cavernous room, a figure emerged, stepping from the gloom with a measured, confident gait. Elliot. His eyes were sharp, cold, and unreadable, his posture relaxed but poised for confrontation. I swallowed hard, steadying my nerves. This was the moment the truth I'd been chasing for years was finally within reach. "You shouldn't have come here, Mark." Elliot said, his voice low but edged with menace. "Sarah's disappearance, none of it involved me. Stay out of things you don't understand." But I saw through his facade. I had Paul's steady presence at my side, and my phone was discreetly recording every word. Elliot's threats of legal action were thinly veiled attempts to intimidate me, to make me back down before I could expose him. I refused to let fear dictate my actions anymore. "Why threaten me now?" I asked, voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. "You are the last person Sarah trusted before she vanished. You owe me answers." His eyes flicked briefly to the corner of the warehouse, then back to me. "You don't know what you're meddling in." I didn't respond. Instead, I moved towards a stack of crates that caught my attention earlier. One of them, slightly askew, hid a small metal safe. My fingers trembled as I pried it open, revealing a trove of documents, financial records, contracts, and letters stained with spilled coffee and time. Each page told a story of deceit, corruption, and betrayal. Elliot's involvement in a scheme that had financially cornered Sarah became painfully clear. Paul leaned closer, whispering, "This is the proof we need." Elliot's composure cracked for the first time. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," he admitted, voice trembling with a mix of regret and defiance. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." Before I could respond, distant sirens pierced the silence. Red and blue lights flashed through the grimy windows, growing louder with each passing second. Elliot's allies must have called the police, hoping to use the law as a shield against the truth. The tension in the room skyrocketed. Elliot glanced toward the entrance, panic flickering across his face. "This isn't over," he hissed. I steadied myself, feeling the gravity of what was unfolding. The confrontation wasn't just personal anymore. It was legal, public, unavoidable. The creaking gate swung in the wind behind us, a haunting echo of the past, colliding with an uncertain future. I clutched the coffee-stained documents tightly, knowing this was the turning point. The fractured pieces of Sarah's story were coming together, and there was no turning back. Additional details and atmosphere. The rusted gate's slow creak was a constant reminder of the fragile threshold I had crossed. Every whispered threat and evasive glance from Elliot deepened the suspense, underscored by the subtle buzzing of my phone's recording app capturing every word. The scattered light caught on the stained documents, their coffee spills symbolizing the imperfections and pain woven through the entire saga. Paul's calm demeanor balanced my rising anxiety, his presence a solid anchor in the storm of revelations. The warehouse's cold, cavernous space mirrored the loneliness and desperation that had defined Sarah's hidden life, now coming to light. The warmth of the fireplace was a sharp contrast to the cold winter night outside. Its amber glow cast flickering shadows over the worn carpet and the cluttered living room where I had been camped out for hours. Papers were spread out on the coffee table like a battlefield map. Statements, receipts, handwritten notes, and photographs. All remnants of a dark story that was finally unfolding. The air smelled faintly of old paper mixed with the pine scent from the firewood, grounding me in the present even as my mind wandered to the past. I ran a tired hand over the cracked basement door's edge, where a thick strip of duct tape had been carefully applied. It was a humble fix, but felt symbolic, a patch holding together not just the wood, but the fractures in my life and in the truth I was slowly uncovering. For years, that door had stood as a silent guardian of secrets, but now it was a beacon of hope, a promise that broken things could be repaired piece by piece. Across the room, Paul was methodically organizing the mountain of evidence we had collected. His face, usually calm and composed, showed the faintest crease of concern as he sifted through the documents. He was the only person I could share this with, the only one who understood the gravity of what we were up against. "This is more than just a personal battle now," Paul said quietly, folding a stained spreadsheet and stacking it neatly. "This is about the community, the neighbors who might be vulnerable to the same kind of deception Sarah faced. We can't let this happen again." His words resonated deeply. It was no longer just about finding answers or justice for Sarah. It was about turning my pain and frustration into something that could protect others. I looked around at the scattered evidence, the financial fraud, the cover-ups, the web Elliot had spun, and knew Paul was right. This was bigger than me. I glanced again at the taped crack on the basement door. It reminded me of the first time I'd hesitated to open it, the fear and uncertainty that had gripped me. Now that door stood repaired, a small but significant step toward healing. As the evening wore on, the soft crackling of the fire mingled with the occasional rustle of paper, and Paul's murmured analysis. Outside, snowflakes began to fall gently, coating the quiet suburban street. The contrast between the calm outside and the storm of revelations inside was stark. Suddenly, a knock at the door broke the silence. I opened it to find Mrs. Whitman standing there, bundled up against the cold. Her usual nosy curiosity softened into something warmer. "I heard about what you've been going through," she said hesitantly. "If there's anything the neighbors can do, we want to help." Her words surprised me, a reminder that community was not just a concept, but real people, flawed, complicated, but capable of kindness. Soon a handful of neighbors trickled in, drawn by whispers and shared concern. The living room, once a solitary refuge, began to fill with voices, questions, and the stirrings of solidarity. Paul took the opportunity to speak about the importance of awareness and action. He talked about the dangers lurking in silence and ignorance, and urged us to come together to prevent further harm. Inspired by his words, I pulled out a notepad and began drafting invitations for a community meeting, a forum to discuss HOA reforms, legal rights, and ways to protect ourselves from manipulation. It was a small step, but a necessary one. The room hummed with cautious optimism as neighbors exchanged stories and ideas. The invisible threads of connection started to weave a stronger fabric of support and resilience. Later, as I checked the mailbox, a familiar envelope slipped inside. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the handwriting Sarah's. I pulled it out carefully, the paper soft between my fingers, and read the simple message, "Thank you." Tears pricked my eyes. It felt like a message from beyond the void, a sign that her spirit was still with me, watching, encouraging. That night, as I sat by the fire, the taped crack on the basement door caught the flickering light, and I realized how much this journey had changed me. From despair to determination, from isolation to community, the path was long but not without hope. Detailed scenes and emotions. Remember the first time I noticed the crack in the basement door? Back then, it seemed like a small imperfection easy to overlook. But now, with the duct tape holding it together, it felt like a metaphor for my own life damaged, but not beyond repair. I could almost feel Sarah's presence urging me forward, reminding me that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but making peace with it. Paul's presence was steady and reassuring. He knew how to listen without judgment and how to ask the right questions. Together, we sifted through the financial chaos Sarah had left behind. There were accounts that didn't match, transactions erased or obscured, and enough evidence to fill a courtroom. Every document was a testimony to the battle Sarah had fought in silence. As neighbors gathered, I was struck by how much unspoken support had been simmering beneath the surface. Mrs. Whitman, once just a nosy neighbor peering from her window, was now an ally. Others shared stories of their own experiences, and we realized this wasn't just my fight, it was ours. The idea of the HOA reform meeting was born from that shared resolve, a collective stand against corruption and secrecy. Sending out those invitations felt like taking the first real step toward reclaiming control. I pictured the community coming together, exchanging ideas, and building safeguards for the future. It was a quiet revolution fueled by determination and hope. And then the card, "Thank you." 2 simple words that carried a lifetime of meaning. It was as if Sarah was telling me to keep going, that our journey wasn't over, but we were no longer alone. The community hall was alive with a hum of quiet anticipation. Every seat filled, every face turned toward the front with a mixture of curiosity, hope, and a touch of cautious optimism. Outside, the gentle drizzle of an early Portland spring softened the world, the scent of damp earth and blooming cherry blossoms drifting faintly through the open windows. Inside, the warm glow of vintage pendant lights mingled with shafts of sunlight filtering through tall arched windows, casting golden patterns on the polished wooden floor. It felt like a sanctuary, a place where past wounds could be acknowledged and new beginnings nurtured. I stood behind the podium, my palms resting lightly on a stack of documents, the product of years of painstaking research, quiet resilience, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The repaired basement door, the very symbol that had carried so much weight throughout this journey, was represented by a large photo on the screen behind me. The brass handle gleamed, its cracks meticulously sealed with weathered duct tape, a metaphor for our community's own mending. That image had been featured recently in the local paper, becoming a beacon of our shared struggle and collective hope. As I looked out over the crowd, familiar faces greeted me. Mrs. Whitman, once a skeptical bystander, peeking curiously through her window, now stood tall among the advocates, her eyes bright with determination. Paul, steady and calm as ever, sat near the front, his presence a reassuring anchor. Other neighbors, young and old newcomers, and lifelong residents, all gathered not just as witnesses, but as participants in something larger than themselves. Clearing my throat, I began. My voice was steady, but carried the weight of years of grief discovery and finally resolution. I spoke about Sarah, her disappearance that had fractured my life, and the shadows it had cast over our neighborhood. I detailed the legal findings, carefully unpacking the evidence that revealed financial misdeeds, manipulation, and the web of deception that had ensnared us all. Each slide on the screen illustrated key points, bank statements, altered HOA bylaws, ignored, and the hidden pockets of power that had operated in the dark for too long. But this was not just a tale of wrongdoing. It was a roadmap for renewal. I shared the community's plan for reform, how we intended to bring transparency to every decision, hold leadership accountable, and foster an environment where every voice mattered. We proposed workshops on legal rights for homeowners, a rotating committee to oversee expenditures, and open forums to keep communication alive and honest. The room was silent except for the occasional nod, the soft scribbling of notes, and the steady crackling of the fireplace tucked into a corner, its flames dancing like the flicker of hope in our hearts. The air was heavy with the shared understanding this was our chance to right the wrongs, to reclaim our neighborhood from suspicion and fear. When the HOA representatives finally spoke, their voices were measured but sincere. Some expressed regret. Others admitted to past mistakes. There were promises to embrace change, to listen more closely, and to ensure that no family would ever face the pain and isolation that Sarah's disappearance had caused. It wasn't a perfect resolution, change rarely is, but it was progress, and for many of us, that was enough. After the official business, Paul rose to speak. His words were calm and filled with quiet wisdom, urging us to remain vigilant and united. He reminded us that healing was a process often slow and uneven, but always possible when people chose courage over complacency. He encouraged the formation of community workshops, places where neighbors could come together to share knowledge, support one another, and stand firm against injustice. The meeting drew to a close with an invitation for all to join in these future gatherings, to keep the conversation alive, and to build a community where transparency and trust were the foundation. As the applause rippled through the hall, warm and sincere, I felt a surge of gratitude and relief. Faces glowed in the soft light, smiles genuine, and shared hands, clapping in unison, eyes sparkling with renewed faith. As I stepped away from the podium, the weight that had rested on my shoulders for so long began to lift. The past was still there, in memories and scars, but it no longer defined us. Sarah's message, the simple, heartfelt thank you she had sent me months before, resonated deeply. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could find a way through. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the clear night sky. I lingered by the window for a moment, watching as neighbors drifted into small clusters, chatting quietly, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps. It was the sound of community reborn, of healing begun. The repaired basement door photo remained projected behind me. A symbol completed a journey closed. It wasn't just a door anymore. It was a testament to endurance, to the power of quiet strength, and to the promise of hope. This was the piece of a quiet hero, not marked by fanfare or spectacle, but by the steady, unyielding determination to seek justice, to build bridges, and to create a future where the past mistakes would not be forgotten but learned from. The story ended here, not with a bang or a cliffhanger, but with a steady heartbeat of hope pulsing through the community. And as I joined the small groups forming in the hall, I knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one we would write together hand in hand. As the golden light of that spring afternoon filtered through the community hall windows, I felt a quiet peace settle over everything, like the basement door finally mended, sealing old wounds but opening the way for something new. It's strange how justice and healing don't always come with fireworks. Sometimes they come softly, like neighbors coming together to rebuild trust, brick by brick. Life has a way of offering second chances, disguised as challenges, reminding us that even broken things can be carefully put back together. Sometimes it's not about forgetting the cracks, but learning which ones are worth sealing. Have you ever found hope in a place you least expected? I'd love to hear your story.